I ruined a good man because he couldn't last 5 minutes in bed, and now everyone thinks I'm the shallow one who destroyed him for sport. They heard what I said. They saw him walk out. But nobody knows what I was actually trying to fix. My friends stopped inviting me to group dinners. My own sister said I weaponized his vulnerability, which sounds like something she read on Twitter at 3 in the morning. Jake's friends act like I'm some sort of predator who got off on tearing down a decent guy. The worst part? I can't even fully defend myself without sounding worse. Because the thing I was really angry about, the actual problem I was trying to address when those words came out of my mouth, makes me look so much more calculating than just being a jerk about premature ejaculation. I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened, step by step, including the part I've only told one person. You'll understand why I said what I said, even if you still think I'm terrible afterward. Fair warning though, the worst thing isn't the insult everyone heard. It's what I did 3 weeks before that fight even started. Jake and I met at a coffee shop in March, the kind of meeting that feels designed by rom-com screenwriters. He actually did trip and spill his latte on my laptop bag, then over-apologized for 20 minutes while buying me replacement drinks I didn't need. He worked in nonprofit management, had a rescue dog named Biscuit, and talked about his job with genuine passion instead of the cynical detachment every other guy my age performed like a personality trait. Our first kiss happened in his car after dinner number 3, and I remember thinking he seemed nervous in a sweet way. He kept asking if I was okay, if this was okay, his hand shaking slightly against my cheek. I found it endearing, thoughtful. A refreshing change from the guys who acted entitled to your body by dessert. The sex thing became apparent pretty quickly. Our first time he finished maybe 2 minutes after we started. He was mortified, apologizing into my shoulder, promising it wasn't usually like that. I believed him because that's what you do when you like someone. I told him it was fine, that we were both nervous, that first times are always weird, except it kept happening. Every single time. Sometimes he'd last 3 minutes if we took breaks. Once memorably, he finished while we were still doing foreground work before anything had actually happened. He'd always look devastated afterward, and I'd always comfort him, say it didn't matter, that we could work on it together. But here's what I didn't tell him. What I started doing after week 2, I began researching his problem like it was my graduate thesis. I joined forums. I read medical journals. I downloaded apps that tracked our attempts. I created a spreadsheet, an actual Google spreadsheet, where I documented duration, techniques tried, and my own satisfaction levels rated 1 to 10. The spreadsheet became my secret project. I'd add to it after he fell asleep, analyzing patterns, theorizing about psychological versus physical causes. I told myself I was being solution-oriented, that I was trying to help us. Really, I was turning our intimacy into data because it felt less humiliating than admitting I was sexually frustrated with someone I genuinely cared about. By month 2, I developed what I thought was a comprehensive improvement plan. I bought desensitizing products and left them casually where he'd find them. I suggested yoga for stress relief after reading that anxiety contributed to the issue. I even manipulated our schedule so we'd have sex at times when research suggested he'd have more control, mornings instead of evenings, weekdays instead of weekends after he'd been drinking. Jake noticed none of this, or if he did, he never said anything. He kept apologizing after each disappointing encounter, and I kept saying it was fine while internally updating my spreadsheet with increasingly detailed notes. My best friend Michelle knew something was off. She came over one evening in early May and found me cross-referencing forum posts about Kegel exercises for men. "What's going on with you?" she asked, gesturing at my laptop screen filled with tabs about sexual dysfunction. I minimized everything quickly, told her I was just doing research for a friend. She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me but wasn't going to push. The thing about obsessing over someone else's problem is that you start building resentment without realizing it. Every time Jake would roll off me after 90 seconds, apologizing, I'd smile and stroke his hair while mentally nodding this as episode 47 premature by 2 minutes despite trying technique from forum post 3847. I was becoming two people, the supportive girlfriend who said everything was okay, and the increasingly frustrated woman who was running covert experiments on her boyfriend's body. I should have just talked to him honestly. I should have said, "This is affecting me, we need to address it together." Instead, I kept playing supportive while secretly treating him like a problem to solve through better data collection. The breakthrough, I thought, came in mid-May when I discovered a highly rated sex therapist who specialized in exactly this issue. Dr. Patricia Chen had a 3-month waitlist, but I called daily until someone canceled and I snagged an appointment. Here's the part that should have set off alarm bells in my own head. I made the appointment for myself, not for Jake. I went alone to discuss my boyfriend's sexual dysfunction with a therapist, without his knowledge or consent. Dr. Chen was professional but clearly confused about why I was there without him. "These issues are best addressed as a couple," she said gently, sitting across from me in her office that smelled like lavender and leather. I explained that Jake was too embarrassed, that I wanted to get expert advice on how to help him before suggesting couples therapy. What I really wanted was validation that my spreadsheet approach was justified, that I was being helpful rather than invasive. Dr. Chen didn't give me that. Instead, she asked questions that made me deeply uncomfortable. Why hadn't I discussed my frustration directly? What was I afraid would happen if I was honest? Did I see Jake as a partner or a project? I left that appointment with a folder of resources and a creeping sense that I'd crossed some invisible line. But instead of backing off, I doubled down. I started implementing the therapist's suggestions without telling Jake where they came from. I'd initiate conversations about us that were really attempts to steer him toward recognizing his problem. I bought a book about sexual communication and left it on the coffee table, hoping he'd read it. Jake, meanwhile, thought everything was fine between us. He'd tell me he loved me. He'd plan sweet dates. He'd talk about future trips we could take together. And I'd smile and agree while mentally cataloging this as week 9 subject remains unaware of satisfaction deficit despite 17 documented attempts at indirect intervention. The tension built in ways that had nothing to do with sex. I started picking fights about unrelated things, his messiness, his habit of being late, his tendency to monopolize conversations about his work. I was redirecting my sexual frustration into generalized irritation, turning him into the bad guy in small ways to justify my growing resentment. My roommate Sarah noticed I was different around Jake. "You're so patient with him," she said once, and it sounded like a criticism. "Like you're tolerating him instead of enjoying him." I laughed it off, but she was right. I had become someone who tolerated Jake while secretly conducting an unauthorized investigation into fixing him. Then came the party in late May that changed everything. Jake's coworker Dan was celebrating a promotion with a rooftop gathering, and we went together. Jake was relaxed, happy, introducing me to people he worked with. I was drinking wine too fast and feeling increasingly frustrated that everyone saw us as this cute, functional couple when I was secretly documenting our dysfunction in a color-coded spreadsheet. Dan's girlfriend Amanda pulled me aside at one point, slightly drunk, and said, "You and Jake are so great together. He talks about you constantly. Says you're the most understanding person he's ever met." Something about that phrase, most understanding, made me want to scream. I wasn't understanding. I was lying. Every single day. I ended up in the bathroom at that party, wine drunk and staring at myself in the mirror, and I made a decision. I was going to tell Jake everything. The spreadsheet, the therapist, the research, all of it. I was going to come clean and we'd deal with it together, honestly, like adults. But when I came out of the bathroom, I overheard Jake talking to Dan near the kitchen. Dan was complaining about his own sex life, saying Amanda was always disappointed, always wanting more. And Jake, my sweet, insecure Jake, said, "Man, I'm so lucky. My girlfriend never makes me feel inadequate. She's amazing about everything." I stood there in the hallway, hidden by a cluster of people, and felt my confession die in my throat. How could I tell him the truth now? How could I reveal that I'd been secretly treating him like a case study, that every time I said it was fine I was lying, that I'd been to a therapist about his dick without his knowledge? So I swallowed it down. I joined him in the kitchen, smiled at his coworkers, and played the role of the understanding girlfriend who was totally satisfied with 90-second encounters that left me staring at the ceiling afterward. The resentment after that party was different. It was sharper, angrier. I'd lost my window, to be honest, and now I was trapped in a lie that was growing bigger every day. I started avoiding sex, claiming headaches or exhaustion. Jake noticed, asked if something was wrong. I told him work was stressful. Another lie on top of the pile. By June, I'd added a new section to my spreadsheet, avoidance tactics deployed. I was documenting how often I deflected intimacy, tracking it with the same obsessive detail I'd tracked his performance. I was creating a comprehensive record of our relationship's dysfunction, and I was the only one who knew it existed. My friend Michelle confronted me in early June. We were getting lunch and she asked point blank, "Are you happy with Jake?" I gave her some noncommittal answer about how relationships take work. She put down her fork and said, "That's not what I asked. Are you happy?" I wasn't. But I couldn't admit that without explaining why, and explaining why meant confessing to months of secretive, invasive, borderline obsessive behavior. So I told her everything was fine, knowing she could see right through me. The strange thing was, Jake and I still had good moments outside the bedroom. We'd watch movies together, take Biscuit to the dog park, cook elaborate Sunday breakfasts. Those moments felt real and good, which made everything else feel even more dishonest. I was living in two realities simultaneously, the one where we were a sweet couple who fit well together, and the one where I was running a covert research operation into fixing my boyfriend's sexual inadequacy. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment when it all became unsalvageable: June 15th. We'd been together exactly 3 months. Jake planned this elaborate anniversary dinner, his idea, which was characteristically thoughtful. He made reservations at an expensive restaurant, bought me flowers, wore the shirt I'd mentioned liking. Over dessert, he told me he loved me. Not for the first time, but with this particular intensity that made it clear he was building towards something. He said I changed his life, made him believe in relationships again after a bad breakup, made him feel valued and accepted exactly as he was. And all I could think about was my spreadsheet. About how episode 73 had lasted 1 minute and 47 seconds. About how I had 17 browser tabs open at home about sexual dysfunction treatments. About how I'd lied to him every single day for 3 months about something fundamental to our relationship. I told him I loved him too, because in some twisted way I did. But it was buried under so many layers of deception and resentment that I barely recognized it anymore. After dinner, we went back to his place. The sex was predictably brief. I didn't even time it that night, which felt like progress until I realized it was actually defeat. Afterward, while he slept, I sat in his bathroom and nearly deleted the entire spreadsheet. My finger hovered over the trash icon for a full minute, but I didn't delete it. Instead, I added one more entry: subject expressed love today. Guilt levels critical, sustainability questionable. The next week, I started fantasizing about breaking up. Not because I didn't care about Jake, but because maintaining the lie was becoming unbearable. I'd imagine the conversation, rehearse the breakup speech. But I could never land on a version that didn't require explaining what I'd actually been doing for 3 months, and that explanation made me sound like a sociopath. I started being meaner in small ways. I'd correct him more often. I'd sigh when he told long stories. I'd forget to text back for hours. I was sabotaging things, trying to make him break up with me so I wouldn't have to confess. Jake noticed. Of course he noticed. In late June, he sat me down and asked if I wanted to end things. He was so vulnerable, so open, saying he could tell I was pulling away but he wanted to fight for us. He asked what he could do differently. I could have been honest then. I could have said I've been lying about being satisfied sexually and I've handled it in the worst possible way and we need to start over with complete honesty. Instead, I told him I was just stressed about work, that I needed space, that it wasn't about him. More lies, always more lies. The spreadsheet had 93 entries by the time everything exploded. 93 documented sexual encounters, each one rated and analyzed and cataloged like scientific data. I'd spent more time managing my boyfriend's sexual dysfunction than some people spend planning weddings. My sister accidentally discovered the truth in early July. She borrowed my laptop to check her email and I'd forgot to close the spreadsheet. She called me immediately, her voice tight with disbelief. "Please tell me this isn't what I think it is," she said. "Please tell me you haven't been secretly documenting Jake's performance." I tried to explain. I said I was trying to help, trying to find patterns, trying to solve the problem. She cut me off. "Does he know about this?" When I said no, the silence on the line was deafening. Finally, she said, "You need to tell him today. This is a massive violation of trust." But I didn't tell him. I couldn't face it. Instead, I became even more defensive and irritable, knowing my sister was judging me, knowing she was right to judge me. The fight that ended everything happened on July 10th. Jake had invited me to a work event, some networking thing his nonprofit was hosting. I didn't want to go. I was tired of performing the role of supportive girlfriend while secretly documenting his inadequacies. We'd had sex that morning, episode 97, lasting approximately 2 minutes, and I was still frustrated and feeling guilty about being frustrated. I told Jake I didn't want to go to his event. He asked why. I said I was tired. He pushed a little, saying it was important to him, that he wanted to introduce me to his boss. I snapped that I didn't want to spend my evening making small talk with his coworkers. He looked hurt. "You never want to do anything anymore," he said. "You're different, distant. If there's a problem, just tell me." And something in me broke. The months of lying, the spreadsheet, the secret therapy session, the constant performance of being okay with something I wasn't okay with, it all came rushing up. I said, "You want to know the problem? Fine. I need a real man, not a boy who finishes fast." The words hung in the air between us. I watched his face change, watched him process what I just said. The hurt in his eyes was immediate and devastating. "What?" His voice was barely a whisper. I should have stopped. I should have apologized immediately. Instead, some awful part of me that had been building resentment for months kept going every single time, "Jake, every time. And I've just been lying and saying it's fine when it's not fine." He stood up from the couch and I could see him physically withdrawing. "You told me it didn't matter. You said we'd work on it together. We never worked on it together because you won't even acknowledge it's a real problem." I was yelling now, months of frustration pouring out in the ugliest possible way. "I've been trying to fix this by myself while you just apologize and do nothing." That's when he started putting on his shoes. "I'm leaving," he said quietly. Some rational part of my brain was screaming at me to stop, to take it back, to explain. But the defensive, angry part was still in control. "Of course you are, running away just like you do from every difficult thing." He stopped at the door. You know what? I told you things I've never told anyone. About my anxiety, about my past relationship, about all my insecurities. And apparently you've just been sitting there judging me this whole time, thinking I'm not a real man. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. He opened the door. We're done. He walked out just like that. 4 months together ended because I couldn't handle my frustration like an adult, couldn't be honest when honesty might have saved us. I sat on my couch for an hour afterward, stunned. Then I opened my laptop and stared at the spreadsheet. 97 entries. All that data, all that research, all that secret effort to fix him, and I destroyed everything with one cruel sentence. I called Michelle immediately. Between sobs, I told her what I'd said, what had happened. There was a pause, then, oh honey, what were you thinking? I don't know, I was so frustrated and it came out. Did you tell him about the spreadsheet, about the therapist? No, Becca. Her voice was heavy with disappointment. You need to tell him, he deserves to know the whole truth. But I didn't tell him. Over the next week, as Jake blocked me on everything and stopped responding to my apology texts, I kept the spreadsheet secret. I told our mutual friends a sanitized version we'd fought about sexual compatibility. I'd said something cruel, he'd left. Everyone assumed I was just a jerk who'd emasculated her boyfriend over premature ejaculation. And I let them think that. Because the truth that I'd spent months secretly documenting his performance, had gone to a therapist about him without his knowledge, had turned our intimate life into a research project, was so much worse than just being mean in a fight. Jake's friends came after me on social media. Nothing aggressive, but pointed comments about how some people can't appreciate good men, how cruelty doesn't make you sophisticated. My own friends were sympathetic but confused about why I'd snapped so viciously if I'd supposedly been fine with everything. My sister was the only one who knew the whole truth, and she was furious with me. You're still lying, she said during a tense phone call. You're letting everyone think you're just shallow when really you violated his privacy in this massive, creepy way. Tell him the truth. I couldn't. How do you tell someone you secretly documented their sexual performance 97 times? How do you explain that you went to a therapist about their body without their consent? How do you admit that every time you said it's okay, you were lying while making notes for your research project? 2 weeks after the breakup, I finally deleted the spreadsheet. I sat at my laptop crying, looking at all that data I'd collected, all that obsessive record keeping, and I trashed it. It felt like deleting evidence of a crime, but deleting it didn't undo what I'd done. It didn't change the fact that I treated Jake like an experiment instead of a person. It didn't erase the months of lies or the cruel words that ended everything. I ran into Jake once in August at a coffee shop near where we both lived. He was with friends, laughing at something someone said. He looked lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. When he saw me, his face closed off completely. He nodded once, barely, and turned away. I wanted to chase after him, to finally tell him everything, to explain about the spreadsheet and the therapist and how I turned his vulnerability into data. But I just stood there holding my latte, watching him walk away again. My roommate Sarah asked me later why I looked so destroyed. I told her I'd seen Jake. Did you talk to him? She asked. When I said no, she sighed. Maybe that's for the best, let him move on. But he didn't know what he was moving on from. He thought I'd just been cruel about his sexual performance. He had no idea I'd spent months conducting an unauthorized investigation into his body, documenting our intimacy like a clinical trial. Michelle staged something like an intervention in September. She invited me for drinks and then got serious. You need to forgive yourself and move forward. What you said was mean, but people say mean things in fights. Stop beating yourself up. She meant well. But she didn't understand that the mean thing I said was just the visible tip of a massive iceberg of deception. I wasn't just guilty of being cruel in a moment of frustration. I was guilty of months of invasive, obsessive behavior that turned my boyfriend into a problem to solve. The worst part, I caught myself doing it again with the next person I dated. Tom and I went out 3 times, and after we slept together the first time, I found myself mentally taking notes. Not actual notes, I'd learned that lesson, but the same analytical approach, the same urge to document and improve and fix. I stopped seeing Tom after date 4. I wasn't ready. I was still turning intimacy into data collection, still treating partners like projects. I started actual therapy for myself about myself in October. Dr. Reynolds asked me why I thought I'd created the spreadsheet instead of just talking to Jake. I gave a dozen different answers over several sessions. I was trying to help. I was being solution-oriented. I was scared of confrontation. Finally, she asked a different question. What were you afraid would happen if you told Jake you were unsatisfied? And I realized I was afraid he'd leave me. I was afraid that if I was honest about my needs, he'd decide I was too demanding, too high maintenance, not worth the effort. So instead of risking rejection by being honest, I tried to secretly fix the problem while maintaining the appearance of being the cool, understanding girlfriend. I'd chosen deception over vulnerability, control over trust. And in trying to avoid rejection, I'd guaranteed it. Dr. Reynolds asked if I'd ever considered telling Jake the whole truth, even now, months later. I said no. What would be the point? She suggested that the point might be his right to know, his ability to make sense of what happened, his closure. But I still haven't told him. It's been 8 months since that fight, and Jake has no idea about the spreadsheet, the therapist appointment, the obsessive research. He thinks he got dumped by a girlfriend who couldn't handle his premature ejaculation and was cruel enough to throw it in his face during a fight. The truth is so much more complicated and so much more damning. I didn't just make a mean comment in the heat of the moment. I violated his privacy for months, turned his vulnerability into data, and lied to him daily about something fundamental to our relationship. The cruel comment was just the explosion after months of building pressure from my own dishonesty. My sister still thinks I should tell him. She brought it up at Thanksgiving, saying he deserves to know the whole truth. I asked what good it would do now, when he's clearly moved on. She said, it's not about whether it does good, it's about whether it's right. Maybe she's correct. Maybe Jake deserves to know that when I said our sex life was fine, I was secretly documenting every encounter. Maybe he deserves to know I went to a therapist about his body without his consent. Maybe he deserves to understand the full scope of what I did. But I also think there's a selfishness in that kind of confession now. What purpose does it serve except to make me feel like I've been fully honest? Damn the consequences for him. He's moved on. Why drag him back into this mess just to ease my own conscience? I'm telling you this now because I saw on social media that Jake's dating someone new. Her name is Sophie, and from her photos she looks happy and normal and uncomplicated. I found myself hoping he's honest with her, that he tells her about his anxiety and his sexual issues, that she responds with actual compassion instead of secret spreadsheets. And I'm telling you this because I need someone to understand the full truth, even if Jake never does. I need to say out loud that I wasn't just the shallow girlfriend who mocked her boyfriend's premature ejaculation. I was someone who spent months violating his trust in ways he still doesn't know about, who turned his vulnerability into a research project, who lied every single day about something intimate and important. The question I keep asking myself is whether telling him the whole truth now would be brave honesty or just another selfish act disguised as virtue. Would it give him closure or just transfer my guilt onto him? Would it help him understand what happened or just make him feel violated all over again? I don't have a good answer. What I know is this: I destroyed something real because I couldn't be vulnerable enough to say, I'm struggling with this and I need us to address it together. I chose control over connection, data over dialogue, and when the pressure finally exploded, I hurt someone who trusted me. So yeah, everyone thinks I'm the terrible person who told her boyfriend he wasn't a real man because he finished too fast. And they're right, I am terrible. Just not only in the way they think. The cruelty they heard was bad enough. The cruelty they didn't hear, the months of secret documentation and unauthorized research and daily lies, was worse. I'll probably never tell Jake the whole truth. I'll carry it myself, this knowledge of exactly how badly I betrayed his trust, how thoroughly I violated his privacy, how completely I failed at basic human honesty. Maybe that's my punishment, living with the full weight of what I did while everyone else only sees the surface. Or maybe I'm just still choosing the coward's way out, protecting myself from full accountability by staying silent about the worst parts. Maybe confessing to strangers on the internet is just another way of performing honesty without actually being brave enough to give Jake the truth he deserves. I genuinely don't know anymore. What I know is that I see him in coffee shops sometimes, happy and light, and I carry this heavy secret about who I really was in our relationship. And I wonder if keeping that secret is protecting him or protecting me.